Today I'm going to talk about books and why I think a lot of people fail at reading. So first I'm going to start with my story. Essentially, when I was younger, I read a lot. My mom was a librarian, so I constantly had books kind of fed to me. And then around 15, maybe even younger, I stopped reading. I got a phone. You go to high school, you get a job, life hits you. You know, like you have a life, you don't have as much time, or at least you think you don't, and you stop reading. And this is a lot of people. And I completely stopped until I got to university. And I'm even more busy in university, but I've started reading again. And how I started, and this is the first thing I'm going to say. To start reading, don't put a goal of, oh, I'm going to read this book. I'm going to read 10 pages. I'm going to read it this time. Just pick up a book. The way I started reading is I couldn't fall asleep, so I would read before bed because I would get so bored that I would fall asleep like this. Reading would make me so bored that I would fall asleep instantly. So I realized that reading was like a glitch to fall asleep. So I started reading. I read probably 10 pages in 2 months. I would read a couple words and go to sleep. But that's how I started. So all that matters to start is pick it up. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter how busy you are. You can find 10 seconds of your life. Just pick up a book, open it, read a bit, put it down, and try to get into that habit. The habit is an important thing of just picking up a book and opening it. Second thing I'm going to say is the book you choose does matter. The book you choose does matter, and choose a book you enjoy. Choose a book. I know this is what I did. I looked up best books for young males or like young adults or something. And a lot of these books came up. It was like 48 Laws of Power, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Atomic Habits, which I have right here. And they're all very good books, but if you are trying to get back into reading, these are not good books to read. I'm telling you, because they're hard to read and they are enjoyable. I think it's a great book. Atomic Habits is a great book, but it doesn't flow. There's no story. There's no characters. There might be some little stories within it, but overall it's set up kind of like a textbook. 48 Laws of Power is the same. You read a law, you read maybe an example, you read about it, you move on to the next one. It doesn't flow in the sense where there's a character, there's story, there's all this. Find a book you enjoy reading to the point where you can't wait to pick back up. And so I'll use an example for me. This book, my little brother got it for me. David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me, great book. And I was skeptical because obviously David Goggins is an amazing guy, but I didn't think he'd be a very good writer. This book is a story about his life, and I promise you I've been wanting to read the whole thing since I started. I read 100 pages yesterday. Atomic Habits, it took me 3 months. I read it from October to December, and I read probably about half, so probably about 100 pages as well. This book, I read 100 pages yesterday. I started yesterday because I got so into it that I just couldn't stop reading. You need to find a book that's like that. Pick up a book, read 40 pages of it. Try to find a book that is going to be easy to read, like a story. If you don't like it, pick up a new book. Eventually, you're going to find a book that you really get into, and you're going to get to the point where it's like you can't wait to read it. That's where you need to be, to the point where you can't wait to read a book. I go home from class, I can't wait to read this. The minute this is done, I'm going to start reading it. That's what you need. Second, the book you choose matters, but also don't knock yourself down for picking a fiction book. And I'm going to tell you why. There's a huge misconception, and I had this as well, that you need to read books that are informative and are going to better your life. And fiction books aren't really that. It's like books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Atomic Habits, or all these books where it's like, they're very good books. Don't get me wrong. I want to read a lot of them. But the reason why it's important to read fiction and why I think reading fiction is not real, right? I think so, yeah. Nonfiction is real. Okay. I'm not actually sure. But the reason it's so important to read fiction, and when I say fiction, I mean fantasy books, like fake, not true stories, is because in those books, you get the experience, not just the guidelines. Essentially, I'll try to use an analogy. When you read a book like Atomic Habits, you get a recipe. You get, this is the steps you need to take to build good habits. This is what you need. It's like a recipe. You need to add these ingredients, you need to take these steps, and then you make it. When you read a book that's a story, you put yourself in the eyes, and you get a first-person view of making whatever you're making. You don't only have the ingredients, you have an actual view of what's happening to make it. You have the view of making it. And that's why reading fiction is so important, because it gives you the experience, not just the steps. Hopefully that's still going. Okay. So don't beat yourself up for reading fiction. I think it's even more important. And I'll try to trying to think how to say this in a way that will kind of resonate. Essentially, in your life, you have 70 years. I have 70 years, 70, 80 years, whatever, to experience everything. And knowledge comes from experience. It comes from experience. There's no way around that. Experience is the most important thing. I have 70 years to experience new language, new food, new countries, read, learn a new language, study what I want to study. Everything in my life, I have 70 years. How long do you think it would take me to do Navy SEAL training? I don't know how long it is for real, but it's like 4 years in the Navy SEALs. David Goggins in this book. He summarized that in maybe 100 pages. I lived 4 years in the Navy SEALs with all his experience. I didn't actually live it, obviously. But I can have an empathetic understanding for him, and I can understand what he was feeling just from reading this book, which is why it's so important to read, because you get the actual experience. If David Goggins just gave a guide for each thing he did, it's not going to resonate as much with me. But if I'm in his eyes and I lived his life through reading this book, the messages in this book resonate so much more, which is why reading fiction is so important. Books like Ender's Game, it's a fantasy book. The lessons in that are going to resonate with you. One of the best books I've ever read, Speaker for the Dead. The book is a fantasy book, but the lessons from it I still remember to this day. And it's because of the way the book was told. The story in the book is what I remember. I don't remember the little details that would be in here. I remember the story. And the story is what gives you the experience. Think about of your life. Think about all the experiences you have. And think about if you summarize them in 10 words, how good they would be. And now think about if you could tell that story to your kids of one of your experiences and the lessons. That story is going to be so much more helpful, the full story, because you experience it. That's the whole point of storytelling. Historically, the whole point of storytelling was to give certain lessons in a way that was experience-based. Like, for example, Little Red Riding Hood. It's a kid's story to tell you not to talk to strangers. If you just tell a kid, don't talk to strangers, they're going to be like, okay. If you do a whole story with a big bad wolf, it's going to resonate a lot more. And it's the same when you're an adult. Reading a fiction book with a deep story and a plot and different characters and different lessons, it's going to resonate with you, and you're going to live an entire lifetime, an entire experience through that book. You're going to pick up traits from that book. You're not even going to realize it's subconscious, but you live through that book. So essentially, it's like if life was a video game and you had to log a certain amount of hours, books are a glitch. Books are completely a glitch. Because for me, to do something, I have to take however much time it takes in my life, but I can read for 10 hours and get the same experience or the same lessons. And of course, it's not the same. Obviously, me reading about the Navy SEALs is not the same as me being in the Navy SEALs at all. But the experiences and the lessons you learn are much, much more effective when you read a book that's fiction, because you actually feel the story. So overall, I'm going to summarize. I'm going to say, start reading no matter what, because if it's something you want to do, if it's a goal you have, I think it's a really, really good thing to do. And I think every single person around you that you look at that reads is wise and is smart and is well-spoken. And I think it's really, really good to read overall. Start reading. It doesn't matter how. Just start. Second, read a book that you enjoy to start. Read a book that you're going to get into. Third, don't underestimate how important fiction is. And these books are still very important. Do not get me wrong. I love reading these books. I'm going to finish this book. I have other books I want to read. But fiction is so, 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 so important. So that's all I'm going to say. Start reading.